4 players were battling for €1 million and the title of one of the most prestigious tournaments. 2 amateurs and 2 elite players were chasing after the glory and the grand prize. But this next hand was about to change it all for one of them. This player started the hand with a subtle smile, but it would soon be wiped out when he had to face the most difficult decision of his career. One that could make his 10-year-long dream a reality, or destroy his chances of ever getting close to it.
This is gonna hunt me for a long time.
It was day 5 of the EPT Monte Carlo 2015. There were only 2 tables left and 12 players remaining, when one of the most incredible hands of the tournament took place. 5 players were dealt a pair in their hand, which in itself is an anomaly. After a back and forth of raises and re-raises, the German Frank goes all in with a pair of kings. The Argentinian Juan Martín Pastor finds himself in a dream situation with a pair of aces, and of course, he goes all in. The decision gets to Adrian Mateos, the new star who had already won a $1 million prize, and who was now seeking to become the first Spaniard EPT champion. Adrian had a pair of queens. He already had 250,000 chips invested in the pot, and now he would have to pay another 250,000 for a pot that was going to have 1.5 million. He had a feeling he didn't have the best hand, but with such odds, it was impossible for him to fold his hand. So he decided to call. Queens, kings, and aces crashed in an all-in pre-flop that was inevitable. Nobody really made a mistake, but now the fate of the tournament depended on the order of the next 5 cards. The flop falls at 2-10-4. Pastorcito, in the biggest opportunity of his life so far, had an 81% chance of winning, but the poker gods had other plans. Like a dagger, the Queen of Hearts on the turn ruined his chances, and the river wouldn't change anything. Adrian Mateos won a crucial pot and positioned himself as the chip leader. While this hand was being played, a curious spectator was closely watching every move. But this wasn't just any spectator. This man was none other than Johnny Lodden, who was also competing in the tournament. And not just that, he was one of the favorites to win it. He was observing the action to understand the position of other players in the tournament. But the outcome of this hand would affect his career far beyond this event. In 2006, Johnny Lodden was one of the undisputed kings of online poker. At a time when it was rare to see games with a buy-in higher than $5,000, Lodden was already playing at $40,000 tables under the alias Bad IP. Johnny was one of the pioneers of the Scandinavian style, known for its aggressive and reckless nature. This led him to be considered the biggest online poker winner of the time. One day, an American player who had been losing to Lodden called him a lucky bastard and challenged him to a heads-up match with the condition that both players would put their entire bankroll on the table. Johnny accepted the challenge. The American was the first to sit down proudly with $190,000, but disappeared when Lodden showed up with $5.9 million. Bad IP was willing to play and beat anyone who dared to challenge him. At that moment, he was at the peak of his career and the poker world, but this wouldn't last forever. Always in search of action, he found an opponent willing to face him. His alias was the Terrorist. This anonymous player had already beaten Patrick Antonius for $500,000, but Patrick refused to play against him again after noticing something suspicious about his play. Johnny, on the other hand, wasn't as cautious. Despite Antonius's warning, he continued playing against the Terrorist. Initially losing $500,000, quickly followed by more losses. Before long, Lodden was bankrupt. Finally, when his bankroll had vanished, he hired a hacker to find out what had happened, and they found that the messenger software they used to communicate had been used to transfer a Trojan virus to Lodden's computer. The Terrorist had been watching Johnny's cards the entire time. Maybe Johnny suspected it, but he just couldn't accept someone defeating him like that, and couldn't control himself. After this unfortunate episode in his career, Johnny Lodden never managed to return to the highest levels of online poker. However, thanks to the financial support of his poker friends, he managed to return to the game. But this time, instead of focusing on the bigger cash games, he redirected his attention to the live tournament circuit, especially the European Poker Tour. Through 2015, Lodden reached the final stages in several editions of this series, including multiple final tables and a notable third-place finish in 2013, which earned him $612,000. Despite these achievements, the title of EPT champion remained elusive, and in 2015, many expected him to finally become champion of the circuit. But there was a young Spanish prodigy in this tournament who was not going to make it easy for him. Johnny Lodden and Adrian Mateos reached the final table of the 2015 EPT Monte Carlo. The action soon broke out between these two players, with Adrian attacking from the beginning, 3-betting Johnny with a 6-2 and getting him to fold his ace-9. Adrian continued to sweep this final table, eliminating one player and getting a double up with a straight against a set of sixes to remain as the final table chip leader. Johnny was putting a lot of pressure on himself. He had made it far on several occasions, but in his own words, he always found a way to screw it all up in the end. He had finished third 2 years earlier, and this was his chance for redemption. The problem was that Adrian was aware of this and was determined to make the most of it. This gave rise to one of the most iconic plays in poker history, a true gem that captivated the minds of poker fans around the world to this day. At the beginning of the hand, there were only 4 players fighting for the title, and €1 million for the winner. The blinds were 40,000, 80,000, with an ante of 10,000. Johnny Lodden is the first to act, and opens to 160,000 with a pair of 5s. Mateos holds a Jack-10 of spades and calls on the button, and the 2 amateurs in the blinds made the call. The flop brings an ace of spades, 3 of diamonds, and 9 of clubs. Nobody hit anything strong, and everyone checks until they reach Adrian, who decides to bet 275,000 with Jack high.
Here I decide to bet small. It's not a flop where I'm going to take the lead very often, but I think the bluff is acceptable because I have few perceived bluffs.
The amateur fares calls with middle pair. The next player folds, and this is where the turning point of this hand occurs. Johnny Lodden unexpectedly decides to make a check raise to 715,000. The alarms in Adrian's mind began to go off.
Lodden decides to check raise on this rainbow flop in a 4-way pot. With our history and knowing that Lodden is a very aggressive player who I've seen make strange betting sequences throughout the tournament, I can't imagine him playing for value here, since almost his entire range consists of bluffs. Most of the ace-kings or ace-queens don't want to check raise, they're going to play c-bet or check call at most.
Adrian, with the plan of taking this hand in the following streets, decides to call the raise. Under pressure from the 2 best players at the table, the amateur had no choice but to throw the best hand away, and they go to the turn, which lands a 4 of clubs. This card gives Lodden an inside straight draw, but perhaps a little worried about Adrian's previous call. He decided to check. Mateos' plan was working perfectly, and now he had the opportunity to take this hand down. The pot had climbed to 2.4 million, and Adrian bets 650,000.
Here the stack to pot ratio is 1. Honestly, I expect a check because I suspect he will check fold very often. Here comes what I think is the key moment of the hand, so I decide to bet 1/4 of the pot. This line doesn't polarize me as much. When I bet here, I can bet with ace-jack or ace-queen for value and protection.
Part of the credit for this impressive hand must also be attributed to Johnny Lodden, who despite taking an unconventional line on the flop, suspected that Adrian was up to something and decided to call his bet on the turn, complicating the situation for him. This is how they arrived at the last card, an ace of diamonds. Lodden checks again, and Adrian, with absolute ice metal, took a few moments to determine the correct play, and then proceeded to seal this perfectly executed poker maneuver, perhaps remembering the most important reason to send all the chips to the middle with a fearless bluff.
There were also 2 recreational players at the table, and that has a lot of value since they will surely make mistakes and Lodden will have easier spots to win chips later. We must not also forget that this is his 4th final table in an EPT, that he had all the spotlights on him, and that he is also sponsored by the tournament organizer. At this point, I tell myself that he will not have the courage to pay in such a complicated spot where the most normal thing is for me to have a full house. It is for all these reasons that I decided to bluff.
Oh my goodness.
He does it. He goes for it.
Wow, this is gutsy. Johnny wants to play so bad. His read is right. You can tell Johnny's first instinct, call. I got this guy beat. He's messing with me. He's totally screwing around. The question is here, does he trust his first instinct, right? He's going to start thinking about the hand, the possibilities, all these kind of things. What he may end up doing is talking himself out of his read. Whenever you're in a situation at a table where you're not sure what to do, go with whatever came to you first, because that's generally going to be the right instinct.
This hand became a psychological battle between two elite players, but Adrian had the advantage, aware of the pressure Lodden was carrying inside. If he calls and wins, he will take the chip lead, moving closer to the goal he has pursued for 10 years. But if he calls and he's wrong, the humiliation could be devastating. It is in these moments when champions are made. But if you give in to the pressure, you might just stay on the verge of greatness forever.
You know, Johnny's the type of guy that is willing to take these risks. A lot of players would fold a long time ago. Johnny just doesn't buy it. He just knows. Oh man, I hope Johnny makes this call. It'll be epic. One of the greatest, if he makes this call, one of the best reads we've ever seen at a final table. You put it in a tough spot.
Still the same cards.
Still the same cards, and you still have the same read, Johnny. Trust your gut. Be a hero one time.
There goes the fold.
And he shows the
playing
bluff.
so good. Wish he calls, he doesn't call. Gets shown the bluff. Ah!
Incredibly played hand. Absolutely epic. That's going to really just deal a blow to Johnny Lodden. He put in so much money in that hand with the right read and then changed his mind.
After throwing away his hand and showing immense frustration, he tried to explain what happened. But at that moment, it no longer mattered.
No ace and I snapped off. Because then it make no sense what he's betting if it's not an ace. So sure you were floating. When I called the turn, I was just gonna call the river. I had nothing.
A few hands later, he had lost more chips, going from 2 to 1.2 million, and sent everything to the center with ace-queen versus ace-9, but his fate was sealed in the tournament when the 9 came out and sent him home in 4th place.
Still, the 5s is gonna haunt me for a long time. Cost me an EPT title and 600k euros probably.
Adrian Mateos, of course, ended up winning the tournament, becoming the first Spaniard to do so. That year, Johnny Lodden continued competing in tournaments, earning some cashes. In 2015, he had $500,000 in tournament winnings, but the following year, his winnings were $847. In 2017, he had good results, but in the last 6 or 7 years, his results are almost non-existent. There are no records of him competing at the online tables, and he has not been present in the most important cash games. In an interview on the website pokerpro.com, he admits to having taken a long break and not having played a single hand of online poker in years, as well as not winning enough. Maybe this hand really did hunt him for a long time and somehow affected his ability to compete at a high level, wondering what could have been if he made that call. Or perhaps he decided to make the respectable decision to step away and focus on his family. Very little is known about him today, but Johnny Lodden will never cease to be a legend for whom many fans hope to see him return to the tables, so that one day he will seal his goal of being the EPT champion